Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Well, to quote the new head coach of your Arizona Cardinals, it felt like the perfect time to be here. Welcome to a special edition of Cards Cover 2 from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. And that's right, the Cardinals have filled their head coaching vacancy, naming Kliff Kingsbury their head coach, a 4-year contract with a team option for a 5th. It is done. It is official. MJ, the Cardinals, the first officially to announce their new head coach of the 8 vacancies at the conclusion of 2018.
Yeah, quite the contrary from the last couple of years. Now, obviously, it worked out when they got Ken Wisenhunt when he interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, it worked out with Bruce Arians. And obviously, it didn't work out with Steve Wilkes. But the fact is they got a jump on this. They were going to be diligent. They were going to cast a wide net. We kind of figured out based on the reports of who they were interviewing. Clearly, they were going for an offensive-minded head coach that calls plays. Yes, he hasn't been a head coach in the NFL. He's called plays. He's an innovator when it comes to play calling. He's worked with young quarterbacks in the past. To me, this is a home run. I know we're going to have to wait and see what his staff's going to look like, but he checks all the boxes, and I'm really excited that he's excited to be here. The building itself is jumping because of the excitement now. According to the press release, press conference will be tomorrow, but the fact is that the Cardinals did the due diligence here. He was actually let go right around Thanksgiving, and then within maybe 45 days, he was working with the USC, and he was able to get out of his contract. So the Cardinals, this is not the first time that they've mentioned a guy like Kliff Kingsbury. Again, he was available right around Thanksgiving, and clearly the Cardinals weren't happy going back to week 2. And so there's ways you could put feelers out there. But at the same time, though, they were focused on finishing the season and finishing on a good note. Unfortunately, they just didn't win enough games.
We'll hear from Kingsbury officially on Wednesday, but here is what he told azcardinals.com. Quote, "I've been around football my entire life. I played in this league, coached on the college level, and have always been fascinated by the NFL. With the offensive trends these days, it felt like a perfect time to be here." And on that topic, we discussed this in depth on Friday because the more that we kept hearing and reading, Kliff Kingsbury's names kept popping up. The Cardinals previously had talked with 4 other candidates, and all with offensive backgrounds. Former Colts and Lions head coach Jim Caldwell, Saints assistant head coach, tight ends coach Dan Campbell, former Dolphins head coach Adam Gase, and Rams quarterbacks coach Zach Taylor. And just a few hours earlier on the Red Sea Report, we discussed on how sometimes what doesn't work the first time around, you do a 180 and look for something else. The Cardinals' first time around a year ago with the defensive-minded head coach, it did not work. And now offense, specifically because of Josh Rosen, their quarterback, the face of the franchise. And you've been harping on this since day one. It's all about his development, how to protect him and give him necessary weapons to move the ball up and down the field. And that's the one thing that Kingsbury is known for, whether at Texas A&M or his 6 seasons at Texas Tech, is the ability offensively to gain yards and put points on the scoreboard.
And he's got an agent that has connections in the NFL, and that's what happens when your name's starting to be mentioned. I'm sure he had to go into an interview with, his coordinators, his staff. I mean, sometimes you got to go too deep when it comes to that kind of stuff. Now, I think we're all excited about the hire, but now all of a sudden we're wondering about the coordinators. And, there's a lot of good coordinators out there that are former head coaches or been defensive coordinators, just haven't got the opportunity. Chuck Pagano, former head coach, Todd Bowles, former head coach, Jack Del Rio, former head coach, and then Terrell Austin, who had 9 interviews. He's a guy that his daughter still goes to school at U of A. So there's some opportunity out there. And then who's the quarterback's coach? Who's the offensive line coach? So, yes, he's the main guy. He's going to be the CEO of this company, so to speak. He becomes the face of the franchise. But at the same time, though, when you start looking at it, filling out the staff is going to be just as important.
39-year-old head coach went 35 and 40 in his 6 seasons at Texas Tech, and the list of quarterbacks he's worked with: Case Keenum, Patrick Mahomes, Johnny Manziel, Baker Mayfield, David Webb, all with NFL experience. And next up will be Josh Rosen as we continue here on a special edition of Cards Cover 2 from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, broadcasting in our Bose QC35s as we do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Darren Urban of azcardinals.com joins us right now, and I read the quote. It was a conversation briefly, I'm guessing, you had with him. It felt like the perfect time to be here. Cardinals have their head coach. Just your initial reactions, because we've had a few days to kind of wrap our arms around this idea when his name's first surfaced.
Yeah, there's no question that we've all been looking at this name for a little while. I think it kind of raised some eyebrows when it first emerged last week. It feels like it's been 3 weeks already since the end of the season, and it's only been 8 days. But I think, this is a guy that, as you guys have already mentioned, he works well with quarterbacks. That was clearly priority number one for this team, is to find somebody that could work with Josh Rosen, and the rest of it we're gonna find out. And are there questions? Of course there are questions, and they're fair reservations when you talk about a guy who has not coached in this league and who is the age that he is in terms of the experience. That said, you start looking at the landscape of the rest of it. The Packers are hiring Matt LaFleur, who has only been an offensive coordinator 1 year, has not been a head coach on any level. Those are the kind of things where there's going to be a give and take. And could you have gotten somebody like a Jim Caldwell who's done it in this league? Yes, you could have. And is this a certain swing for the fences type of move? It might be, but this is where they felt like they needed to go. And for me, I kind of want to see how it plays out. The staff is obviously a big thing in terms of how you're going to kind of judge this at an early stage. I mean, it's January. We're really not going to know much until we get into the season.
Darren, it's hard to predict the future just based on we see how, teams feel like they can win right away. Teams go from worst to first. But I think when you make a hire like this age-wise, because I think Jim Caldwell checked a lot of those boxes, unfortunately 63, and hopefully he gets an opportunity. But this is a hire for the next 5 to 6, 7 years. Now, I know we need to let it play out, but they got to go in there with the mindset. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, I think that was the mindset when you hired Steve Wilkes, was that he was going to be your guy for the next 5 or 6 years at least. So I think every time you'd be making a mistake if you're not going into a head coaching hire thinking it's going to be a long-term answer and you're going to have some success over those next 5 to 7 years,
sure,
whatever it might be. So absolutely, that's how you got to look at it. And at this point, until you really know the staff, until you really know what this roster is going to look like, it's really going to be hard to handle or even make a snap judgment. There's going to be a lot of snap judgments out there on Kliff Kingsbury, in terms of what I've seen from the fan base, from the media. I've seen both sides, a lot of it. I've seen, fans and media types saying this makes a lot of sense, somebody work with Rosen. I've seen the other side where, people are saying this doesn't make sense, this isn't going to work. Again, this was the choice that Michael Bidwell and Steve Keim decided to go with. They felt pretty strongly about it, obviously, to move in this kind of pace. This is, much earlier than Bruce Arians got hired or Steve Wilkes got hired. So, this is what they wanted to do. And again, we'll see exactly what it looks like in August in training camp and in September when the season starts and even when we get to November and how that first season starts to go.
No question, it's out of the box. College coaches don't make the NFL jump without prior NFL coaching experience. The last one to do it was Chip Kelly in 2013 and was actually successful those first 2 years with the Eagles. And then we saw it with Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, won Super Bowls with the Dallas Cowboys. You can go the other way. Steve Spurrier, not successful with the Washington Redskins. The difference here, though, for me, and I know it's another first-year head coach, but the difference between Kingsbury and Wilkes for me is he does have head coaching experience. It's not on the same level, but he does know what's on his plate or what could be on his plate. That's the one thing that Wilkes was kind of not ready for, the decisions that need to be made outside of on the field. Everything else that gets shuffled in front of you on your desk, whether it's kids, parents, boosters. Kingsbury has all of that, so I think that will help. But again, we'll have to wait and see what happens once the season starts and whether you're successful on Sundays.
I don't disagree that Kingsbury's got some things that he's done in the recent past with head coach. I mean, Steve Wilkes was a head coach briefly once upon a time on the college level. A lot different of a world that we live in now.
Sure.
In terms of being a head coach and the scrutiny and the constant eyes on you that you're always going to see. I mean, as we've seen before, everybody's already having the fun with the Ryan Gosling gifts and all that stuff. But Kliff Kingsbury has grown up with that and lived through it, so I think he can handle or should be able to handle that part of it. But again, you know, whether he can command a locker room, we're going to have to see how that plays out, how he relates to players. I mean, it's one thing to be a younger coach in your mid-30s or late 30s as a head coach in college, because all your players, nobody's going to be older than 22 or 23, whereas you're going to have guys that you maybe not be quite as old as you are, but are going to be in their 30s, and they're much more your peers. I mean, how is that going to play out? We kind of have to see how that goes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's fair to figure out where we're going with that.
He's younger than all three of us, by the way.
Oh yeah, everybody's younger than all three of us.
I would just thought I'd throw that out there.
Yeah.
Now, I texted a couple players within the last hour, and I text one on one side of the ball and one on the other, and the defensive player says, "I hear he likes to throw the ball a lot." Yes. And the other offensive player says, "I'm looking forward to getting a chance to meet him." So players are excited. And when the defensive player, and he's a good player, he says, "Well, he throws the ball a lot. That's good because we're going to do our job on defense and let the offense take care of the points." I
mean, look, one of the things that this team had issues with last year in terms of the chemistry and all that stuff is, and we've talked about it on many different platforms, is offensively, when you're not good, and not only were the Cardinals not good, but they were really, really not good, that it drains a lot of hope out of the whole team, and that includes the defense. And I think the hope kind of gets restored here on January 8th with no players and no playbook and no nothing, but at least a feeling like, okay, the offense will be in better shape no matter what happens. And that's the hope. Now, do we know that's going to be the case? I mean, could we come out in September and there could still be a lot of struggles because of personnel or whatever? Yeah, that could still happen. But right now, the hope has been restored there. And I think defensively, again, depending on who they get in as a coordinator and get the right guy, but I think a lot of those defenders feel like they could have been better in the right put in the right situation, which a lot of them felt like they weren't necessarily in the right situation. I think they feel like they could be better, and if they can get their game to where they think they already should be and the offense improves, that changes a lot of things.
And for our viewers and listeners out there, when you hire a new staff, you get to open up your off-season workouts a little bit earlier. You know, the thing here is that, you know, when you look at Kliff Kingsbury, I mean, he's a guy that already has a playbook. You know, he's going to have to add to it, and obviously NFL-wise, but he's going to bring a lot of stuff. When McCoy came here, he took a little bit from the here, and it was so confusing and complex. Even Sam Bradford was in 4 or 5 different systems. He struggled. So he's going to have a playbook. Now he's going to have to add to it. And listen, you can sit there and have this huge playbook, but you run 5 to 8 run plays a game, and then it's based on how the defense is going to play. You don't have to get cute and fancy here. And hopefully the first thing we hear from, besides he's excited to be here, is I want to use David Johnson the way he was used in 2016.
And that's a good point, because we all get talked about or caught up in the passing attack, Darren, but Texas Tech did have a strong running game. They had back-to-back seasons of 1,000-yard rushers, so it's not like it's just pass. And when people think of Mike Leach and the air raid, it was somewhat similar, but Kingsbury did some tweaking to that offense and made it a little bit more balanced.
Well, first of all, you're going to need that, because on the NFL level, you're going to need more blockers once in a while. You're not going to be able to spread it out all the time. You mentioned Chip Kelly earlier. One of the things you don't want to be in a position of is to be moving at such a pace, even if it's producing points, that your defense is having to play 40 minutes a game. You don't want that either. And there's a balance, and there is going to probably be a learning curve when it comes to that stuff. But I remember, you talk about playbook. While he is going to have some tweaks, I had a player mention to me, and he was talking generally. That's not necessarily directly to McCoy or any one coach in particular, but he was just like, so many of the successful offenses in the league these days, like you said, you're running 5 running plays, you're running 5 pass plays, and where the differences come in is the formations and the movements and the motions, and that's where you're trying to get the defenses off balance. That's kind of what McVay does a lot of the time, and there just wasn't enough of that with what the Cardinals were doing, and I think Kliff Kingsbury will understand that a little bit better.
Now, we had a veteran head coach in Bruce Arians and a veteran quarterback in Carson Palmer. Yeah, they finished 10-6, just missed the playoffs, but really Carson and the offense really didn't turn the corner until about week 8 or 9. I can't remember when their bye week was, but so there's going to be a learning curve. I mean, the expectations are going to be a lot higher than they should be, but there's also going to be some patience involved, whether they play a 3-4-4-3. And we're talking about 2 savvy veterans in Arians and Palmer, and it took at least half the season for that to come to fruition.
See, for me, I don't know what the expectations are going to be, because anybody putting expectations on an NFL team now, whether it's the Cardinals or anybody else that's not in the playoffs, I mean, unless you're talking about expectations of the Rams in the next 3 weeks or the Saints or whomever, a team that's not playing in the NFL, there shouldn't be any expectations for next year, because there's so much that needs to be done. If we want to talk about what the expectations might be July 4th, after they've gone through the draft and free agency and we have an idea what the roster might look like, better. And if we want to talk about expectations once we've gone through most of training camp and maybe a couple preseason games, that I understand.
We're still not going to know.
No, we're never going to know. But when you're talking about expectations, I have no expectations right now. And really nobody should. I mean, I think Michael Bidwell and Steve Keim have expectations that it will be better. That's what you're making that hire for. But for me personally, it's hard to have expectations because you don't know how this is going to look. I mean, it reminds me a little bit last year with the whole we don't know who the quarterback is at this time last year. They hired Steve Wilkes, but we didn't know who the quarterback. Now, obviously, they know the quarterback this time, but there's so many other moving parts, especially given how high they're drafting and how many things need to be worked on this roster, like the offensive line, like the wide receivers, like potentially the linebackers, number 2 cornerback, all those things. For me, it's almost impossible to have any expectations, even if you know who the head coach is.
More of your brief conversation, Darren, with Kliff Kingsbury on azcardinals.com. Quote, I think you see where it's been, where it's going. You have a good young quarterback, lots of salary cap space, and a team that will continue to fight through the season. I'm really honored to be here and excited to be here. Any idea on whether Kingsbury has spoken to Josh Rosen and or Larry Fitzgerald?
That did not come up. I'm guessing it probably wasn't. I mean, if we think about the timeline, guys, and it was well reported, but I mean, he came in, he was with the Jets just, yesterday? So, I mean, we're talking about turning this around pretty quick. I don't know if any of that's happened yet. I mean, I would think that there's going to be some phone calls made, obviously, to guys like that. And hopefully he touches base. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But like the Fitz thing, somebody asked me on my mailbag that went out before all this happened about whether Larry should be involved in picking the next head coach, and maybe that would make it more likely for him to stick around. See, to me, there's so many things that go in, and I thought this last year before they hired Steve Wilkes. I don't think the head coach hire means as much to Larry in terms of whether he wants to play or not as people think it does. I just don't think I think he has all these other things that he's going to consider rather than who the head coach is. And I know people think that's a little weird, but he's on a different level on whether he wants to keep playing. It's not about playing here. He's going to play here if he plays. So it's just a question of playing. And I think there's deeper reasons for whether he would play or not. And so I don't think that's that huge of a deal.
Well, just based on reports, you would think Aaron Rodgers would be involved in the process. Mark Murphy and their new general manager, you read reports in New York, they want Sam Darnold to be part of the process. So I think it varies each team. But obviously these guys have connections. I'm sure that at some point they want to get the phone number, but there's NFL rules, and once the press conference is over, they kind of got to go bye-bye for a while. So, but through back channels, you could see that conversation will take place at some point in time.
Yeah, we look what this staff looks like moving forward will be the next big question, and we just wait to hear from him on Wednesday. Darren, I know you've got a lot of work ahead of you. We appreciate a couple of the minutes, and I'm sure we'll be talking very shortly here on Cards Cover 2.
There's going to be lots to talk about this offseason.
Yeah, Kliff Kingsbury is the new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. By the way, earlier today, one of his former quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, this was even before the news had been announced, but Mahomes meeting with the media in Kansas City, getting ready for the playoffs this weekend. He was asked about Kingsbury, and Mahomes, quote, "I think he could be a great NFL head coach. He has the work ethic. He has the passion for the game. I know he loves the sport, and I know he's going to be able to relate to quarterbacks. He would put in the work, and now it's about him finding out where he needs to be at," unquote. Jake Glazer on The Athletic, strong endorsement for Kliff Kingsbury. Gil Brandt, NFL Network, or Sirius XM NFL
the
Radio.
Godfather.
Endorsing, and even said earlier, this was months ago, that he would not be surprised if Kliff Kingsbury was an NFL head coach. And look, we all have questions, want to know staff-wise, but a lot of this is just kind of day-to-day, week-to-week, and really even in the offseason and training camp, we're not really going to know, maybe not even in the preseason. It's going to take a few weeks into the regular season to figure things out. But when you're talking about this franchise moving forward, what's the number one reason to be optimistic about this franchise? It's the quarterback, Josh Rosen, and the Cardinals went that direction with an offensive-minded head coach.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on expectations?
I have none. I mean, because I'll go back to a year ago when we were and it changes because you get excited as the offseason progresses, as you see these players. Granted, they're not in full pads, but you get excited for the start of the season. But I'm going to have to temper expectations just for me personally because I'm in a wait-and-see mode now. I'm excited about the hire. I think it's a great hire, especially for a young offense and what Kingsbury could do with this offense. But it looks great on paper. You know what? All these stats, his resume looks great. Okay, let's get to game day. And we're well away from that. But tell me what you're going to be able to do to combat teams within your division, within the NFC, within the NFL. So I'll make judgments as we move forward, but I'm just anxious and won't jump to conclusions until we're several weeks into the season.
No, that's fair. And, the expectations last year was this team I don't know if they're going to be 8-8 just based on the schedule, and obviously going in with the rookie head coach, rookie defensive coordinator, firing the offensive coordinator after the bye week when they lost to the Broncos. So there were expectations that you wanted to see the Cardinals make progress. There were expectations that maybe we'd see more out of Josh Rosen. There were expectations we would see more out of this defense last year. So my expectations, I just want to see improvement. I want to see this team be competitive week in and week out. I want to see this team learn how to play smart and finish football in the fourth quarter. Those are my expectations. So I'm not sitting here saying they're going to go 11-5 next year and they're going to win the West. No, that'd be ridiculous. I'm going to respect the Rams and Seahawks, and I think the Niners will be better. But my expectations are for this team to be a lot more competitive than they were in this previous season.
I'll say this. The Cardinals here on January 8th are better, a much improved ball club, than they were on January 7th.
And think about it. They haven't even had a draft yet. They haven't been able to retain some of their own players that are on the radar. And we haven't approached free agency. So that's encouraging. There's hope. There's optimism. And there's expectations, I think, along the lines. Nobody's saying they're going to be a playoff team next year. That's why they play the game. But we're going to see this team go into games, and hopefully they can keep it competitive. If not, take care of business and run David Johnson into the ground when it comes to the fourth quarter.
In Kingsbury's 6 seasons as head coach at Texas Tech, his offenses finished 12th, 16th, 1st, 2nd, 10th, and 8th nationally in yards per game. And we know what the numbers were for this Cardinals offense in 2018, dead last in nearly every statistical category. So even with Kingsbury on board, I think this offense is much improved because I think he knows and has seen where this league is going, because we've talked about it. It's adapting the college game with where these young quarterbacks are moving forward. And now you've got not only a young quarterback already in the fold, but now you've got a young offensive-minded head coach in place where those two can grow together. Because remember, Rosen, not that it was a lost season, but he got reps. And I don't know much more than that in 2018 that he got, because there wasn't much that you could glean from as far as where he was week 4 to week 17 as far as his development as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, now, Texas Tech has a pro day, so, you can look back on how many guys got drafted out of Texas Tech. We know that Patrick Mahomes and Baker Mayfield transferred to Oklahoma. So, the pro days, he's talking to player personnel guys, general managers, so it's not like, he's walking in blind where he doesn't know anybody. He's a well-known name, not only in college football, but I'm sure if you're an owner maybe 2 years ago, hey, keep an eye on this guy, down the road, so to speak. We're happy with our head coach, but I would think every owner, general manager has a list in his desk. If something happens, number 1, number 2, number 3. So I think he does have more college connections, because obviously he's been coaching college football, but this guy just didn't come out of left field. He didn't come from a different country, and all of a sudden he's trying to learn it. So I think there'll be an adjustment. But at the same time, he's a ball coach, so he's going to be able to relate to other guys.
As we leave you here on this Tuesday, I'll remind everyone on what team president Michael Bidwell said when the news was announced that Steve Wilkes was no longer going to be the head coach on December 31st. He said they would keep things, quote, close to the vest, unquote, when it came to the head coaching search. Well, yes, they kept things close, because Kliff Kingsbury on December 31st was not on anyone's radar with regards to the Arizona Cardinals and this opening. Again, Kliff Kingsbury is the new Cardinals head coach, a 4-year contract with a team option for a 5th year. He'll be introduced officially at a press conference on Wednesday, and we'll carry that press conference live right here on Cards Cover 2. Special thanks to all those behind the scenes, our producer, Jim Omohundro, Brandon Natus, my partner, Mike Jurecki. I'm Craig Grialou, and special thanks to Darren Urban filling in or joining us here on Cards Cover 2. Much more on azcardinals.com for the news of the day. Kliff Kingsbury is your new head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday here on Cards Cover 2.